Good morning, thank you for joining us. My name is Kyle Cowan. I'm an investigative reporter with News24. Now this morning we're joined by advocate Terry Motau, whose explosive report into the collapse of VBS Bank has been dominating headlines and the national conversation so far this week. It was released on Wednesday by the South African Reserve Bank. Now he has uncovered wide-scale looting and pillaging totaling a staggering 1.8 billion rand, orchestrated by a handful of individuals, some employed by the bank, some politically connected. And the scheme has led to the collapse of the bank. Basically, massive liquidity crisis. The bank had no money left. Terry, thanks for joining us here at News24 this morning.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Terry, for many people, VBS Bank is not a household name. It's not your FNB or your Absa or your Capitec. A lot of people don't know what it is. You've been at the helm of this 5-month-long intensive investigation. Tell us what VBS is.
VBS is a mutual bank as opposed to a commercial bank. And a mutual bank has a number of restrictions that an ordinary commercial bank cannot do. One of those is one of the methods through which the bank finds itself in this liquidity crisis. It is a situation where deposits were allowed or permitted to be made by municipalities where there is clear national legislation
Strictly prohibiting this.
and strictly prohibited.
Correct. Okay, so what did you uncover? What did you find? This investigation was quite intensive. You did a lot of interviews. It's under the new Financial Sector Regulation Act, so this is also a first, I think, in the country. What did you uncover, and why should ordinary South Africans care about your investigation?
The first and the most concerning thing for me is to start at the beginning. You have, and I put it in inverted commas, an acquisition of shares by an entity that later becomes a purported majority shareholder. And that transaction is in itself a fraudulent transaction because that the purchase, and I'm putting it in inverted commas, is done through a fictitious deposit.
Okay.
The entity pays no money for it, and it creates a representation that it paid an amount of 80 million rands for the purchase of the shares, when that is factually incorrect.
So in your report, you explain what these fictitious deposits actually are. So just to take our viewers through it as well. Basically, some individuals inside the bank created money out of thin air.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And what would then happen is when a deposit is made, a genuine deposit, that makes money available to be used for the benefit of an entity for whose benefit a fictitious deposit had been created.
And this is basically that's the nub of the scheme.
That's
is
the nub of the scheme.
Okay. And 1.8 billion rand over a period of, what was it, 3 years?
3 years. And for me, it is very disgraceful that you have a situation where the elderly and the most vulnerable were saving their hard-earned monies with the hope that it's going to be safe, it's going to generate interest, and that money too is at the heart of what was stolen out of this bank. And I am quite surprised that as a country we are not concerned about this, and we want to put a different spin to it, for example, or we want to put a color to this bank when this has nothing to do with it. You can't even be talking about whether it's a black bank, whether it's a green bank, in instances where the purchase is a fraudulent
I understand.
transaction.
So that brings us directly to why the ordinary South African should care. So what the picture that your report paints and the picture that you're indeed painting to me now is that hard-earned money from people who are not middle class, people living in Sandton, they're living in Limpopo, they're living in rural areas, they work very hard for their money. They put it in this bank because they trust this bank. They hope that it will grow and give them a future small fortune maybe to retire on, or even just a little bit of something to build a house.
Correct.
And
Correct.
as an ordinary South African living in Johannesburg, why should we care?
Well, we are in a constitutional state, and at the heart of this is the element of accountability, and we are building our country around the spirit of Ubuntu. And it would be very troubling for me, or to me, that somebody who resides in Rosebank, in Sandton, does not feel anything about this and is not even affected by what has happened. I think it affects us directly and indirectly as a country, because at the heart of this also, you have people's confidence in the banking system. And which is why I also do not understand the debate about whether this bank can still be saved. I mean, in the report I make it clear,
Yes.
and I motivate the reasons why it cannot be rescued. So the fact that a bank in a country has closed down or was put under curatorship, it has got nothing to do with whether are you a depositor with that bank or not. As a caring citizen in a constitutional state,
You should be concerned. You should
in
be
fact,
concerned.
you should be outraged by it.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So the fact that there are different narratives that are sought to be told by different persons in this, I mean, is of utmost concern to me.
Yeah.
Because the basics are clear. There's no disagreement. Money has been stolen from the bank. The amounts are there. You know, this is almost 2 billion that has been stolen.
It's a lot of money.
In fact, we are supposed to be saying, who did it? Chase those people, let them answer.
I understand. There's an interesting comparison that you can draw. So former President Jacob Zuma, during the Fees Must Fall protest, said that the government needs 3 billion rand to fund some of higher education.
recall that.
And this is one example of an amount of money that was stolen that could have almost brought those concerns to an end.
That's the gravity of this theft.
And also, we're talking about opportunity cost. You know, schools could have been built, hospitals. So the list really is endless of what this money could have been better utilized for, other than buying Lamborghinis and Porsches for a few rich elites.
And in fact, to put this in its proper perspective, you have deposits by municipalities that were made with this bank, which was money that was intended to improve the lives of ordinary South Africans in terms of service delivery, the building of schools, building of hospitals, infrastructure, roads.
Yes.
And none of those deposits were recovered. In fact, in instances where a municipality like Capricorn, if I recall from the report, that was saved, the person who played her part and who actually assisted the municipality to recover its deposit, you will see in the report,
She was suspended.
and she is labeled as a racist. And which is what baffles me. What does race have to do when it comes to wrong or right? I mean, if the rules of the road are that when the robot is red you must stop, and when it's green you must go. If I've gone against, or I've entered the intersection against a red robot, does my color matter? Should it matter?
No, shouldn't. So crucially, when we strip away the details of the scandalous fraud, your report is exceptionally detailed, 148 pages roughly. It takes us right to the very heart of these issues. So when we take that out of the way, the recommendation was for the bank to be wound up. Essentially, you said there's no prospect of saving this bank, and I think your words were rotten to the core. So what would it take now to save this bank?
Well, it's a very difficult question for me to answer, because having considered the evidence, I could not come to a conclusion that the bank can be saved. For me, if you want to start an alternative, there is nothing that prohibits the licensing of a different bank entirely. What should be borne in mind here is, to run a bank, you need depositors, you need investors who have confidence in the brand. And that confidence, for me, has been diminished. The reputational repercussions, apart from the difficulties that I've identified, which are practical, that the personnel in the bank, particularly at senior management level, who are part of the scheme, are still there.
It makes it very difficult for you to envisage a situation where the bank could be turned around and the strategy, some sort of strategy could be put in place.
The brand has been tainted, and for me, it's been tainted beyond recovery.
Okay, so let's look forward. Your report has been published now, and we are seeing an avalanche of litigation is coming your way. People like the former KPMG partner Sipho Mlaba announcing last night he's going to court. The brother of EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, Brian Shivambu, has also said, I'm going to sue you guys for defamation. You found me guilty before giving me an opportunity to be heard.
Yes.
And my question is really quite simple. How do you see this process playing out in the next few months or few years?
The one thing that I would want to emphasize is that through the many interviews that I've done, I have identified that there are different, or people fall into different categories. You have people who engage with the issues that arise from the report who have not read it at all. They pick up issues that are raised by others. You have others who've read it in part, perhaps in respect of portions that they deem to be relevant to them. You have others that are perhaps reading it for purposes of completing it. And you have what I call the most important category, a list of persons who are reading the report for purposes of understanding it. And for me, I think if we can try and gravitate towards the fourth category, including those that are mentioned, including those that are threatening litigation, that I would urge people to try and gravitate towards the fourth category. Read the report for purposes of understanding it, and try and see whether the narrative that you're putting out there can be supported by the report. In particular, just to give you an example. I mean, I've heard, and I've also read the statement by Mr. Brian Shivambu, and what are his concerns, and assuming those are correct, just one read at the report will show you that the complaint cannot found as its basis the content of the report.
Correct.
It cannot be grounded in the report. But whether people want to go to litigation, I mean, it's a constitutional country. We have, it's freedom of choice.
Yes.
He must consider the contents of the report and see whether his complaint, as I say.
It seems almost like an unnecessary question, but you obviously stand by your report to the very end.
I can tell you this much. I have satisfied myself with the integrity of the information upon which this report is based, bearing in mind that there are components of the report that were not disclosed to the public, and the reasons have been motivated. The police must still do their part. The NPA must still do their part. People will still have an opportunity to put their side of the story if the NPA accepts the recommendations based on what law enforcement officers will have done as a follow-up to this. So,
I understand.
In respect of Mr. Malaba, similarly, the country can see what is happening. KPMG, where Mr. Malaba used to work, has taken a particular position in respect of the report, of cooperating, and they've issued their own statement, which I read this morning.
Yes.
They too, I understand, say they did their own investigation, pursuant to which Mr. Malaba had to exit.
Yeah. We'll see what the future brings. So finally, and I think quite importantly, do you think people should go to jail? In your report, you recommend more than 50 individuals and companies be criminally and civilly held liable for this fraud scheme. And then, are you confident in the criminal justice system? Do you think the NPA and the Hawks are going to do what is required to bring these people to justice?
One can only hope that the right thing will happen. We must bear in mind there is a possibility that people are going to proffer an explanation that proves their innocence. And you'll recall in the report, there is specific mention of the fact that people are not found to be innocent or are not found to be guilty. All that the report does, it states facts. Let me give you an example. The report says Mr. Brian Shivampo received an X amount.
Yes.
He comes out yesterday, he confirms that he received the amount. But his explanation is, I didn't receive it from A, but I received it from B. Whether that...
And he says this report essentially then finds him guilty before a trial. I don't see that.
I don't know how he comes to... But that's why I do not want to go down that narrative.
Yeah.
I was only giving words of caution and advice to say, people, whoever is affected, whoever is listed. I mean, I've been contacted by other entities who are listed, including this morning, who say, we've taken legal advice. We say, you are not saying we are guilty of anything. I say, well, thank you for reading the report correctly. But I mean, we are influenced by our own circumstances.
Correct.
And there are factors that one cannot ascertain that influence people's response and reaction to this. But to come back to the question, the report provides a solid basis and a solid foundation for law enforcement officers to take the process to the next step and for the prosecutorial authorities to do what they need to do. In order for this country and its citizens to enjoy the confidence of people in positions of leadership, people in entities with a constitutional responsibility, this is, for me, an opportunity for the Hawks to come to the party and for the NPA
So in a nutshell,
to do likewise.
You're saying that this is an opportunity for the Hawks and the NPA to use your report to showcase to the South African people that they are still trustworthy, they are still credible, they are still there to make sure that law and justice prevail in our country.
If I were placed in any of those two institutions, I would have seized this opportunity without even thinking twice.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was our interview with Advocate Terry Motau relating to his explosive report, The Great Bank Heist, into the collapse of VBS Bank. Stick to News24. We're going to bring it to you first all the time. Thank you.